Welcome back to pixelprojectradio, the video game discussions podcast where we do deep dives and analyze all of our favorite games and some of yours too. My name is Rick, and today is an episode I've been looking forward to for a while now. We are going to be talking about the Outer Wilds. No, Outer Wilds. No just Outer Wilds. Terrific 2019 adventure game that is just packed with things to talk about. As always, up front, I've got to thank the patrons. They keep this train moving, and without them, this would be significantly more difficult to do, nigh impossible. So thank you to the patrons. If you'd like to learn more and be like those fine folks, you can check out the link in the description to www.patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. Speaking of the description, in the description, as per usual, you'll find more information about our guest today, returning guest Josh Koval from the Still Loading podcast. You might remember Josh from the wonderful Celeste episode, and boy howdy am I thankful Josh put this game on my radar. Josh, thanks for joining, man. How's it going?
Oh man, I am doing absolutely fantastic. In a weird sense, I've had a rough couple days, but the podcast, like looking forward to this episode and some of the other podcasting I've been doing over the last few days has been a much needed bright spot. So I'm very happy and excited to be here to talk about Outer Wilds, and I'm so happy you finally played it. I'm really looking forward to our conversation on it.
Ditto all around. Here, ditto, well said, etc., etc. Could not agree more. I'm happy you're here. I'm happy we're doing this game. Before we start, quick note. If you're a new listener, first of all, welcome to the show. The way that we normally do things here is we analyze a game from top to bottom, and we don't spoil anything before it happens in the story. That is to say, if we're in Chapter 2, nothing from Chapter 5 or 4 or 3 will get spoiled. If we're in Chapter 29, Chapter 30 won't get spoiled, etc. Things like that. With this game, with Outer Wilds in particular, I'm going to issue a sort of blanket spoiler policy. I would strongly recommend not listening to this episode until you've played the game for yourself. You will do yourself no kindnesses by spoiling this game for yourself. I don't want to tell you how to consume the media you consume. I'm a sign, not a cop. It's the famous Simpsons quote. But this is a game, we were talking off mic a little bit. This is a game, I don't want to get into a digression too early, but there's this notion, this train of thought, this ideal in video games today of maximalism, of using every possible resource, of expanding a work and a product and an IP to the brims and then overflowing a little bit to get every amount of attention from the viewers as possible through DLCs, through extra campaign modes, through gacha mechanics, paid costumes, live services. Companies and games want you to be on their product for the long run. And in that way, it's a continuous, nonstop loop, a Mobius loop, if you will. This game, Outer Wilds, stands on the other side of the shore in direct opposition to this. It is so focused and singular in what it's trying to say and accomplish, and its thesis statement is so tightly packed and never abandoned that one experience is all you need, and you can really only experience this game truly one time. And I would never want to take that away from anybody. I know this sounds like I'm being a bit maudlin or saccharine or exaggerating. I promise you I'm not. I don't like to put my history in front of the guests with games like this. I try to always kick it to the guest to talk about their experiences first. I did not expect to love this game. I was expecting it to be a sort of, cozy indie game, which is a descriptor, a series of adjectives that usually turns me off from video games. I had a profoundly moving experience with this game, bordering on spiritual. It quelled existential crises in me that I've been dealing with for a long time. And we'll talk about that more as it goes on. I kid you not, I've thought about this for weeks since I finished. I think this is one of my favorite games of all time. Top 5, no question. I came away from it feeling the same way I came away from Disco Elysium, which was lightning in a bottle, a singular experience. I can't believe I'll never get to experience it again in some ways. So didn't mean to jump in front of you, Josh.
No, not at all.
As you could probably tell, and as listeners could probably tell, I feel very, very strongly about this game, and I'm very excited to talk about it. So, kicking it over to you, I kind of got my stuff out of the way. When did you first play this game? How did you first come to it? It just released somewhat recently in 2019, so it's not all that old. Did you play it upon its release?
Yeah, so I have a really interesting way of how this game kind of came onto my radar. In 2019, doing my podcast is when I first started getting to do interviews with either content creators or people in the industry. And I remember this ties in with Outer Wilds, so just kind of follow the story for a second here, where I reached out to Austin Wintory, the composer of Journey. He also has done stuff for he did an Assassin's Creed game. Man's done a ton of different soundtracks. I can't, if you look at his credits, the man's done an insane amount. But Journey was something that really affected me when I played it back in 2013. And so when I started feeling a little bit more bold and brave, I decided to ask him. And I emailed him, didn't hear any response for months. And then he actually, out of the blue, messaged me or replied. He's like, "Hey, I'm sorry I missed this. I would love to come on the show." I'm like, "Absolutely, no problem." So I actually record that interview with Austin. I have to wait to release it because of press embargo type of things and blah, blah, blah. While I was waiting for that episode to drop, that I could drop, his PR company reached out to me again and said, "Hey, would you be interested in interviewing Andrew Prallo, the composer of Outer Wilds?" And I had no idea what it was, but I was still so new to interviewing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll take any chance I can get. A PR company's asking me to interview one of their clients. I need to take advantage of this if I can do so. So they did not send me a review copy or anything, but I actually bought Outer Wilds in preparation for my interview with Andrew Prallo, which you can still listen to. It is still up. I don't think it's a very good interview. I'm not saying that to be modest. I actually re-listened to it today, and there is a lot of I think maybe it's just one of those things. You listen to older episodes of yourself and you feel a little cringy.
Sure.
Why did I phrase it that way? Why did I butt in at that moment? Stuff like that. In any case, Andrew was a wonderful person. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. And at the time, I actually had only played Outer Wilds for maybe an hour or so. And it was a slow burn for me because I say it on the episode and I'll reiterate it here. This type of game is not my cup of tea. It is something that whenever there's an exploratory game, I usually don't really get into that. The sense of exploration and discovery don't always work for me depending on how it's done. So I then go back to the game after the interview, and I guess just something about it stuck with me, and I became hooked on the game, and I could not stop playing it. Just learning and discovering more about this world that they've crafted. And I'll try to keep it a little vague here so we can go more into it in the episode, but learning more about the world that was crafted for us to explore and how they are able to motivate you, how the designers are able to motivate you to want to explore more. Even though this game usually isn't my cup of tea, it sucked me in and never let me go. So when I finally beat the game, I still have that feeling years later of that, just that joy of discovery and learning about this world. And I was telling you off mic, Rick, how when I was prepping for this episode, I tried to replay it and I couldn't do it because the mystery unfortunately had been already solved. I don't want to say ruined. It was already I already knew what this was. And that's why I'm so happy you put that little preamble at the top to let listeners know who may not have played this. You need to experience this game before you listen to us talk about it, because it's not that we can spoil storylines or spoil plot twists or character development or anything like that. This game is nothing, it exudes that sense of discovery. And if that gets ruined for you, that makes it a lot harder to enjoy this game. So it's very important. There's very few games that I can confidently say that you should not listen to anything about it before you play it the first time. Don't partake in any media. Maybe listen to the soundtrack. It's a good soundtrack, but in general, don't look into any media about this game before you play it, because it won't make the experience as special as it was. So that is a very long-winded way to go through my history of this. I found out about it because a PR company asked me to interview Andrew Prallo. So yeah, that is my experience with it. Just this kind of like happenstance, like random chance that it just ended up blossoming into one of my favorite games, one of my favorite experiences of all time.
That's really terrific. Listeners, check out the description. I will link the interview with Andrew Prallo that Josh did in there. I co-sign everything you said about not listening to anything or reading about anything before you play this. It's a bittersweet kind of feeling to boot it back up again, knowing that you can complete the game. Well, you can beat the game in roughly 15 minutes if you know exactly what to do. In reality, it doesn't work that way. I think, it must have been 20 to 25 hours of gameplay for me till I actually got to the ending. But you can beat it much quicker, and it's a very bittersweet feeling that, oddly enough, ties into the themes and ideas of the game. That bittersweet feeling that you know how it goes, and you've seen the beauty at the end of the tunnel, and there's really no recreating that, but how lucky we were to experience it. Speaking of themes and ideas, generally at the top, since we've done the soft reboot of the show, I've liked to talk about themes and symbolism, things like that at the top of the episode, just as a general overview to set the tone and set the flavor. Not today. Even though it cannot and will never be a one-to-one experience, I want to keep these two episodes as similar to experiencing the game as possible, to as organic as our feelings were going through it top to bottom. This fundamentally won't work, and you'll quickly see why once we get into this quote to the story discussion. But the themes and symbolism will come in the next episode, without the DLC, by the way. Neither of us have completed that, so we're not talking about that. But in brief, this game to me is about community, the families of both the local village and the global species. It's about the beauty of discovery, and about both the fragility and the serene beauty of life and the universe, a sort of confrontation of existential dread, not with a whimper and a cowering feeling, but an embrace. I really had like a deeply moving experience with this. I'm really excited. Community forum. Oh, yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as am I. Like it's one of those games I've noticed, at least for me, that games that have a profound impact on me, I don't realize how much of an impact it had on me when I first play it. Like when I beat this game, I was like, okay, that was cool. And then it never left my mind. Like every time people talk about Outer Wilds, first off, people go, oh, do you mean Outer Worlds? No. Outer Wilds. It's with an I, not an O-R. But besides that, whenever people bring it up, I can hear the soundtrack in my head. I can remember the exploration and some of I'll go into more detail as we talk about it through this game, but how this game kills you, and I mean that in a good way. So we'll get into all that, but it just all of that comes flooding back. And even though I played it through to completion back in 2020, I still have such a vivid memory of almost every single thing in this game. Maybe not so much the lore, because there's a lot of lore in this game, but the planets themselves, and we'll get into that as we go along. But I don't think there's any other way to say this other than I just adore this game to pieces, and I feel like I'll just keep reiterating that throughout the entire episode.
Speaking of adoring the game, this is usually where the community forum would go, but perplexingly, we didn't get any responses for this game. I thought for sure that Discord members would write in about their experiences with this game. I know one person in particular is playing it right now as we speak, but no community forum today. So we can move right on into some facts and figures.
That actually doesn't surprise me, with the exception, I know Keith from Main Quest likes this game. So I was surprised that maybe he didn't write in, but I do think that I was telling you off mic, Rick, about how this game, it feels like a cult classic, where the people who have heard about it and play it and actually work their way through it, it's one of their favorite games of all time. but the vast majority of people have not heard about it. So when you say that not a lot of people in your community wrote in about it, that honestly doesn't surprise me, because, it also came out at literally the same time as Outer Worlds, almost not to the date, but it was the same year. So that caused a lot of confusion. And I feel like this game bizarrely gets overlooked, but if you go to like a YouTube video of the soundtrack or just any moment in this, almost every single comment is like, man, I wish I could experience this for the first time again.
Truer words. Yeah. Speaking of releasing, it did come out in 2019, in May of 2019 to be exact, for Windows, Xbox One, and PS4. Windows, I believe it was Epic exclusive for a little bit, which, will cause some problems. It did come to PS5 and Series X, Series S in 22, and eventually to Switch in 2023, which I had forgotten about. I played this on PC largely. I played a little bit on PS5, but I'm not gonna lie. This is one of the few games where I think having the power of PC is best, solely because you get that 120 FPS, which you wouldn't think would be a big deal, but whenever you're turning a lot and rotating when you're in space, I couldn't trade it to the PS5 as much as I was like, I could play on a bigger screen, but no. I need that sweet frame rate. As always, you can find the full credits on the wiki or the IMDb, or you could just play the game. But of note, we've got developer Mobius Digital, one of only a couple games they have. I think the only other 2 games on their website were 2 mobile games. Like, one is very clearly ripping off the imagery of Outer Wilds. It's called like Beacon 38 or something. And the other one, it just looks like I am not disparaging Mobius Digital, but it kind of looks like Mobile Slop a little bit, just with the art style and the mechanics. I think it's called Chromatera. I am open to being wrong. If these games are very good, then, I accept defeat here. But that's Mobius Digital. Published by Annapurna Interactive. They sure do have a knack of finding the gems. Mm-hmm. Directed by Alex Beecham. Designed by Beecham, as well as Lone Verneau. Art by a gentleman named Wesley Martin. Writing by Beecham's sister, Kelsey Beecham. Composer, as Josh has alluded to and interviewed, Andrew Prelo. A fair amount of non-game stuff on Andrew's website, but I did see another video game, Eclipse Edge of Light, which is a VR game. I don't do VR personally. I can't afford it, but 2, I don't know. It's just not really for me. I've heard that this does have a VR mod though, Outer Wilds.
I think this could work in VR, like that. It would really add to immersion. It would make you more immersed than you already are. So I'm almost a little afraid to.
Yeah, and I can imagine motion sickness being a pretty big thing.
Yeah, with the space travel and everything, and especially like. I like the controls already for this, and they're not bad by any stretch, but they take some getting used to. So totally. I would be very curious how that they would translate to VR.
Yeah. They're intuitive, but there's an adjustment period. Mm-hmm. I can definitely imagine, especially some of the planets getting a little hectic in terms of movement. Speaking of planets, a basic overview of this game is this. You play as an astronaut, and you're exploring a small group of planets. I think there are 6 or 7, trying to find information on this extinct species called the Nomai. And the hook of the game is that you're in a time loop. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think that's pretty well known. You're in a time loop that keeps happening over and over again. And another part of the game is figuring out what the heck is going on there. To that end, here's something that Beecham had said previously. He says, quote, "We wanted to make a space exploration game where the reason you're exploring space is to learn about the world and gain knowledge and not conquer planets. Our ideal version of real-world space exploration." Mm-hmm. End quote. That's sort of the impetus behind this. It's not about a quote-unquote hard story. There is a story, but it's not about that. It's about the exploration. A core theme of this game, maybe a sub-theme you could say, I don't know, is this idea of childlike wonder at the unknown, mm-hmm. right? Like, I don't have children, but my friends that do, when their kids get to be a certain age, they reach that discovery phase where you just can't, they're just asking why about everything. Why does it work this way? Why is this way? Why? How does that work? What's the deal with that? And there's this innocence and beauty to it, of the human experience at large, wanting to seek and explore, but it gets beaten out of us as we grow older, and that's a lot of that has to do with our society and how it works to exist in a Western society, let's say. Don't want to get political. No, I'm just kidding.
What do you mean art's political? Sorry.
It gets beaten out of us, right? And this game is tapping into that beautiful ideal that I think is still within all of us. It never goes away completely, but we maybe have to work to get back to it.
I was just going to say, and even if not well versed enough to know the dangers of Western capitalism as much as I probably should, considering I live in it, but something I also think just in general, even if you take out like the societal angle of it, just as you get older, you see more things just inherently. So you lose that sense of wonder because you've already learned so much. Like now when you play games, a lot of times, like I'll be running down a hallway, for example, in like say Uncharted or any game, and my wife will sometimes watch me and be like, why aren't you going down that hallway? I'm like, well, I can tell there's not going to be anything down there. Or if there is, it's a collectible that I'm not going to really care about because I've already learned the language of game design to an extent because I've played so many where that sense of wonder and discovery is not there. I'm not poking at every single corner because I'm just I know nothing of there is going to be of substance there, at least of interest to me. Maybe that does show a reflection of Western society. I don't know. But I feel like as you get older and you learn more about just the world around you, you naturally have less that you're curious about because you've seen so much. So when a game comes along and is able to re-peak that curiosity and reintroduce you to that childlike sense of wonder, it is a very rare feat indeed. And I think this game really nails it.
While I agree with you, I will offer this counterpoint, and I think this was said in the No Clip documentary. More on that in just a moment. But in this game, if exploring a solar system sounds overwhelming to you, just know that there was some design considerations they took, wherein if you see a part of a planet that looks entirely barren, chances are that it is. They do use visual elements to signal to a player that something might be there. For example, markers on every single North and South Pole. Visual elements are present that show you, hey, something is here, and if something is here, it is almost certainly worth looking at. I think in the same documentary, one of them, I can't remember who said it, but every line of dialogue that Kelsey Beecham wrote is important. There's like one or two that are not, like just kind of flavor. But everything else is important to your journey and to what happened. So yeah, if you see like just stretches of green on Timber Hearth, for example, your home planet, you could probably safely move on to, let's say, the geysers that are right up ahead or the giant crater that was not here 2 weeks ago. Speaking of the No Clip documentary, we're not going to spend a ton of time on development because the No Clip doc exists. It's on YouTube. It's about an hour long, and it does a deep dive into how this game was made with interviews from the staff, way better than we could talk about. So that's also in addition to Andrew's interview with Josh. This No Clip doc will be linked in the episode description. Check it out. It's really good. There are two other things that I did want to mention, maybe three other things about the development, though. One, as this was being developed as part of Beecham's master's thesis at USC, there were a couple of pieces of media that were influential. Those were Apollo 13, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and two Zelda games, because Beecham's a big Zelda head, Majora's Mask and Wind Waker. And I guess in a way, Skyward Sword, because he had mentioned that he really didn't like the departure from the Zelda formula with Skyward Sword, and this game is a sort of response to that. Now, I've never played Skyward Sword. I'm notoriously not a big Zelda guy, but from the three that I have played, Majora's Mask, Link's Awakening, and a little bit of Wind Waker, actually, I can 100% see it. This shares a lot of the same DNA in obvious ways, and then, maybe not so much. I don't know. Have you played Skyward Sword? Do you know what he means by that?
Not in the slightest. It's one of the I've played a bunch of Zelda games, but I have not played Skyward Sword yet. Mainly just because I don't feel like doing the stick waggle motion controls. Just I'm not really, I don't know, not feeling stick waggly. So maybe I'll get around to it at some point.
One other thing of note is that this was the first game to be crowdfunded on a website called Fig. This was a video game crowdsourcing site, sort of similar to Kickstarter, but, for video games. It doesn't exist anymore. It got liquidated and bought into a larger company. And I was thinking, I don't know, I've never heard of this before. And in fairness, it did fund some other successful games, hit titles like Psychonauts 2 and Pillars of Eternity 2 and Jay and Silent Bob Chronic Blunt Punch.
Funny story. I actually have Jay and Silent. So I don't know if I have Chronic Blunt Punch, but I have Jay and Silent Bob Mall Brawl, which is like a Double Dragon style, beat 'em up for NES. You can even Limited Run had an NES cart version of it too. Hopefully that one doesn't blow up. Topical. Yeah, so I actually have dabbled a little bit with Chronic Blunt Punch and kind of the games surrounding it because it was made by the same studio.
Yeah, is it good?
I have not played Blunt Punch, but Mall Brawl is actually pretty decent.
Every so often, every couple months or so, maybe 6 months, 7 months, I get that jingle stuck in my head. $15, little man, put that shit in my hand. If that money doesn't show, then you owe me, oh me, oh. I have a lot of affection still for those Kevin Smith movies. I really do.
Oh, I mean, don't even get me started, man. I am a huge Kevin Smith fan. He was one of the inspirations for starting my own podcast. The only time I ever legitimately got upset at him is when he went into crypto for a hot second, and it seems like he's out of that now. But that's a digression for another day.
Yeah, so did folks like Tony Hawk, and there's a part of me that wonders, maybe they just don't understand what it is, and they've got, a publicist or a finance guy whispering in their ear, and they're just yeah, sure, you take care of it, and I'll keep doing my thing. I want to believe that, is what I'm saying.
At least with the Kevin Smith stuff, unfortunately, it was he was doing, advertising with the crypto people, doing, Twitter Spaces back when Twitter was still Twitter, stuff like that, but since that kind of really flopped, he also released... he released the first ever movie as an NFT. Kevin Smith did. It was called oh my gosh, Kilroy Was Here. It was a horror anthology flick, and I'm sure there's ways to watch it now, but I almost refuse to watch it just out of I don't care if it's not an NFT anymore. I don't want to support that shit. So it's just, I won't do it. I love Kevin Smith, and he has since not really spoken about crypto in easily 3 or 4 years. So it that came and went pretty much, but it's still kind of it bummed me out when I saw it. It was one of the first times where I was man, I love your podcasts and I love your movies, and even the ones that other people don't I still enjoy, but this is just not for me, man. So he seems to have backed away from it, at least now.
Yeah, that sucks, man. He's going to look back on that and have some regrets, I'm sure, if he doesn't already. I'm going to pass this to you. I'm going to save a lot of my thoughts on visuals for as we're going through the game. I think it will just work better that way, and that's where the mechanics discussion will live too. There was one quote from the designer, Wesley Martin, that I saw that made me laugh a lot. This game lived in an alpha phase for a while before it got funded and published for everybody, and during that time it got taken around to some festivals. And at the IGF, the Independent Games Festival, Wesley Martin, who then was not working for Mobius, saw it winning all these awards, and he said, my first thought was, I can make better art than that. And so I did. So he applied and he got the job, and then he eventually did all the visuals. I like the visuals a lot. They're not hyper stylized, but I think every location is very unique. I think the Hearthians and the Nomai are they're very charming. I'm a big fan. I like the presentation quite a bit.
I'm with you on that. I really like the visuals. I like that they're very simplistic, and cel shaded is not the right term, but they're kind of cartoonish in a sense, and I mean that as a compliment because, like, you know, the Harthians look kind of like a cartoonish alien. The Nomai almost look like something that you would see out of like Destiny, you know, like from Bungie or something like that. So they have a really interesting mix of styles, but it works really well with the world they've given you. Without spoiling any of the individual planet discussions, I will say they do a phenomenal job at having a very strong visual identity for each planet you go to. And each planet also has different mechanics and what you have to manage, which we'll obviously also get into a little bit later. But the visuals are just so good in this, not only because they just are pleasing to the eye, they're simplistic. So like, I feel like this art style is probably going to hold up a lot better than maybe some others as time goes on. But also it just is amazing because each planet just feels so distinct. Like if you, I mean, not just to name a few of the planets, you know, you have a planet called like Brittle Hollow and Giant's Deep and the Ember Twin, and the Interloper, which is kind of a planet, but not really. Well, it's not. But you can, once you've played those games and you hear those names, you know exactly what that planet looks like, what the color palette of that planet is, and what its kind of like big gimmick is. It's a really wonderful art design and just great art direction all around.
Yeah, it does have a sort of timeless feel to it. It's not cel-shaded like Wind Waker, but much in the same way, this is going to look good years down the line, like you said. And that's a terrific stylistic choice. You can, you know, it's really easy to fly too close to the sun with this kind of thing and make
Pun
something...
intended with this game.
Yeah. Or was it intended? We'll never know. But to try too hard almost, to really... force yourself to try and get in your own way and create something that looks unique but maybe doesn't stand the test of time. Something like this, something like Wind Waker, something like Celeste in 15 years is still going to look really good. And I think that's a testament to it. Color does also play a big part in this, but it plays a part in the same way it plays a part in nature, which is not a coincidence. That's part of the identity of this game. If something looks dangerous based on its color, there's a good chance it might be a little dangerous. One other thing, I'm not sure where to put this because I don't really have a section dedicated to performance, so visual works. This is like a big simulation at all times because everything is moving.
Yes. I'm so happy you brought this up. Continue. Sorry, I was thinking about that too. I'm like, I have no idea where this is going to fit in. So I'm so happy you brought it up.
But in that way, it's like this isn't going to be a strain on your GPU, even if you get like the updated version and blah, blah, blah. It's not a PS5 Pro game, but it is somewhat, I mean, I wouldn't call it intensive, but it uses the CPU more. And that's because it's just always rendering the planet's gravity, the individual gravities and the gravities in relation to each other. The planets are rotating and revolving, because those are different. Thank you, science class. And the fires are going, and sand and water. Like, this is a physics sandbox dream. And because it's always being rendering, that's kind of a big CPU task. So, like, for example, when I played this on my PC, my newly built PC, I'm broke as hell, and it runs, it runs fine. When I switched to my Legion Go, it didn't run poorly, but like, the fans were going, like it was working. And it's not because it's a GPU intensive game. It's a CPU thing. But to that end, like that made me wonder a lot about the Switch port. Switch hardware was kind of outdated when it came out, and now it's still going. We still haven't got Switch 2. And I'd be curious to see how the performance is on that little handheld standby.
If they're able to get it work pretty fluidly, I'm going to be just incredibly impressed, because like you said, this game is constantly like, it's basically a solar system simulation on a very small scale. There's only like 6 planets, and they're all in relatively close proximity to each other, at least enough that you can fly quick enough to get to them. One of the things I really loved is that when you look at the solar system map, all the planets are still moving. So like the map is like it almost feels like they just took a camera and put it, like 50 miles away from the whole solar system. And that's what they're using for the solar system map. It's like constantly staring down and just waiting for you to look at the solar system map. It's it's so immersive because the planets actually work like a solar system should. I believe they programmed it to be as accurate as possible for the system. And from my understanding, like the gravity it behaves the way it should based off how strong or how weak it is. They all rotate at different speeds and at different obviously distances away from the sun. Maybe not rotate's the right term. It would be a circle or orbit. That's the word. Orbit around the sun at different speeds. It's crazy how much detail they put into just making the solar system work like an actual solar system.
Yeah, and to that end, when we had mentioned earlier that this was a master's thesis project, I don't know how many of you folks know this, but you don't always do master's thesis in things like music. These are physics guys. Like the reason that they're physics nerds is because, you know, that's what they do. That's what they do. This is a love letter in many of the purest senses. So of course they took the time and the care to really make this true to life. Now, of course, there are some mechanics that come in later in the game related to quantum mechanics, which I never thought I'd be fucking talking about on this show, that, you know, maybe aren't true to life, but I'm not about to fault a game developer for not adhering to quantum physics rules. So, well, in the game anyway. If they didn't in real life, you know, I would love to talk to them about that. But all this to say, I'm derailing myself here. Yes, it is very accurate to how things work, with the exception of, like, you know, you could go across the whole solar system in 5 minutes.
Yeah, obviously planets that close to each other would not be able to. That I would assume there'd be a lot of gravitational issues with those types of physics. But like in general, just the way the solar system works it's impressive from a technical standpoint, and it's immersive from a storytelling standpoint. It just works on all fronts, which is just very. I just love that. It was one of those things where I didn't realize how immersive it was until I was playing it, and then I noticed that like. The map is a 1-to-1 representation of what's happening outside, where like if you get lost, separated from your spaceship, which you can do, you'll see it like just kind of floating around like, or something. I mean, I don't actually, no, that wouldn't make any sense because you can only see the map on the spaceship, or no, you can see it outside of I don't remember anymore. But you can see different, like if something, there's a way to tell. I'll leave it at this. There's a way to tell on the solar system map through the gameplay that you're seeing a 1-to-1 like representation of what's happening in the solar system is also happening on your solar system map at the same time.
Yes, well said. To be fair, I did issue a blanket spoiler warning up top. So I appreciate your candor and your respect for the craft. But
I'm trying.
You know, let's not spoil the ending, but, you know, I think we could be a little looser with our lips. We could sink some ships, just a couple.
All right.
Speaking
I got
of
a few Titanics in me. Sorry.
Hey, speaking of Titanic, that movie had some pretty good music. And speaking of having pretty good music, I will force this square peg into the round hole for the transition. Let's talk music of Outer Wilds. A beautiful, amazing soundtrack. Simplicity as profundity in the most explicit terms. I came away from this loving it. And here's the kicker too. Music thematically is very important in this too. And it's one of the first things you hear in the game and you're introduced to, and it's one of the last things you are exposed to. Music, and I'll say this, you know, this is something I don't want to spoil till we talk about it later. Music is something that has been with us from time immemorial. I categorize myself, and I promise there's a point to this, as somebody that generally doesn't believe in higher powers and things like that, but desperately wants to. I desperately want stuff like that to be real. The mysticism and the otherworldliness and the spirituality. And of course, my beliefs have changed over time, as so do all of ours. Music is something that I think is very near to the concept of God and to the concept of spirituality. And because of this, it unites us as a culture now, as a culture globally, and with our ancestors from the past and in the future. It's something that binds us together, not just as a local culture, but a global culture across time. It is part of the inherently human experience, and that is important in this game. That plays a central role, and the ending discussion is going to be phenomenal. My head is swimming. The music in the game, though, and I'm sure you talked about this with Andrew a lot, which listeners should check out that episode. It's good.
I don't know. So listening back to it, I focused a lot more on talking about his influences than talking about his work on the game. There is a couple things that we talked about on the episode that I think are worth mentioning here, which I don't know. I can get into it once you're done talking about the music on your end. I have a couple fun facts that I can offer up, but it was my second ever interview with someone in the industry, second ever interview with a composer. And so I learned a lot from those first couple interviews, and I would do things differently now. It's still not a bad episode from what I listened to, but I just wish I would have actually spent more time asking questions about Outer Wilds. And I asked a lot about like his influences. Like, I mean, you can hear it probably, Rick, in this. Like, some of his biggest influences were Explosions in the Sky, that band. I'm blanking on it now, but he very much likes that kind of like atmospheric style of like soundscapes is how he describes it.
And soundscapes and atmospheric is exactly the vibe that we get with this soundtrack. There are two major identities within this game. One of it is that electronic soundscape that is invocative of emotion without being strictly adherent to melody and harmony, right? Melodic rhythm and harmonic rhythm are kind of set to the side to favor timbre and abstract emotions rendered through sound. That's identity number one. The competing identity that is still related, still united in the whole spiritual aspect of music is what I kind of call campfire music. It's music that's accessible, and yes, I did choose that word intentionally for this game. But it's true. It unites us because it's part of the common tongue. It's the common vernacular. Anybody can sing campfire songs. They're diatonically simple. They don't stray too far from, usually the major or the minor scale. They're very singable. They're very whistleable, and you can play them with a guitar around a campfire. And we see a lot of that in here too. Music not to necessarily promote an abstract feeling or interesting soundscape, just to express camaraderie. Just to bond with those with whom you might share a marshmallow around a fire.
Man, does that really hit home at the end of the game. I'll save it for that. It really hits home at the end of the game. Now, fun fact about that melody that you hear throughout the, like you said, there's the soundscape half and then there's the melodic half that's meant to be around a campfire. That first banjo sting, that dun 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 dun, that banjo sting or that banjo part was actually recorded. So Andrew told me when I interviewed him that he was gifted like a broken banjo from a friend like years prior to him even working on Outer Wilds, and he's like, man, I wonder what I could do with this. And he kind of was tinkering around with a melody, and so when he recorded it, that recording on a broken banjo is what ended up in the final game. So that's why that banjo has a very slightly different sound than you might hear other banjos make.
That is so fascinating. I did not know that. I knew that he composed it a while before the game started, but a broken banjo that was just gifted. That's incredible.
It kind of like it almost like began his work on the game and ended his work on the game, if you think about it.
And it comes from a very human place. It was shared with him, this nondescript instrument, this not flashy at all, and out comes this simple melody. This melody that permeates the entire game and is representative of the Hearthians. It's extremely diatonic. The melody itself and the accompaniment doesn't have any harmonic motion. It stays on the one chord. It stays right there. And the melody is extremely scalar. It starts with an arpeggio and it just kind of walks down to do and sits around there. It's very whistleable. It doesn't span more than an octave. The only instance of harmonic rhythm is the keyboard bass that eventually comes in. Eventually. It's not even immediate. And at that point, you're hearing so much that's just sitting on the one that, where is your attention? And I think that's important because it creates this feeling of hominess, not just the whistleability of the tune, not just the camaraderie feeling of a simple campfire song, but because it's melodically just sitting on what we call the tonic chord, the home key, and it just lives there, and that's it. And it creates the sense of we're home, we're where we belong. And when it gets intermixed with the Nomai music, which is much more experimental, searching, yearning, sometimes earnestly, sometimes urgently, we'll hear more about their story soon and why I chose those adjectives. When those two start to mix, it's, I don't even want to call it a metaphor. It is like an explicit telling the viewer, the listener, the player that these two cultures, despite being eons apart, thousands and thousands of years apart, are united. They're not the strangers that you think they are. We are not the strangers that we think we might be to somebody from the 1600s. We are united in that way through something as spiritual as music and discovery, which is the other aspect too. There's so much about this that is so special.
We haven't even touched on the actual gameplay mechanics. We are just literally going through just the overall presentation and how cohesive the presentation is to the game's narrative and themes. It's there, and we barely have scratched the surface. Excuse me. That's what's even more nuts. And sorry, one last fun fact I want to bring in right here. You mentioned how whistleable it is. If I remember correctly from re-listening to that episode, Alex Beecham did the whistle for that. Like when you hear someone whistling that melody, that's Alex Beecham doing it.
Oh, very nice. I'll do my best to call out some other interesting musical ideas when they come up in the game. One thing that's very cool about this soundtrack is the different tracks will trigger based on where you are, what you're doing, and also when you are, which is important. And all of that will become clear in time. You had mentioned we haven't scratched the surface. Perhaps it's time we do. So before we dive in, please know, if you're still listening, there's really not a way to talk about this game linearly. You could quite literally do things in whatever order you want. It depends on when you make discoveries and how you make them. This isn't reading a book from top to bottom. This is putting together a puzzle. And, you might get a few pieces in the corner, then you might find a few in another corner, and then all of a sudden the middle might start appearing. And you can't get it quite all connected, but you've got that middle part, and I don't know how it connects to the corners, but eventually it will. That's the experience of playing this game. Not dissimilar to the idea of a Mobius loop, right? It twists around and in on itself. It is not just a flat circle. So do know that as we go through and talk, we're going to be going through planet by planet. For this episode, we're going to start with some that most folks are probably going to tackle first, and we're going to save the more complicated ones like Dark Bramble and Brittle Hollow for episode 2, and then obviously the ending. We might miss some stuff. I did my best to be very detailed and thorough with what I took down in the notes. And we will do our best not to get ahead of ourselves. I mean, the general way of playing this game is not to go planet to planet. You're going to go from one planet to another, to a third, come back to the first, then to a fifth, back to the second. All the while, you're making this into a Charlie Kelly Pepe Sylvia board. But because we have to have some kind of order here, otherwise everything falls apart, we're going to do it planet by planet. And we're going to start that now. So, Josh, what do you say we jump in and start with our first Night Under the Stars?
I'm ready to sit by a campfire and break this all down.
And with that, let's open our eyes for the first time and talk about the beauty of Outer Wilds. So, the first thing that happens is you get a prompt to wake up. And one thing that you might notice is that when we wake up, we're playing from the first-person POV. There are 4 eyes. You open 4 eyes. That's significant. We can maybe talk about that in just a moment here. The first mystery, though, this is one of the first 2 things that captured my attention. As soon as we open our eyes, we see something in the sky shoot out, like a shooting star kind of, but it shoots out of what looks like a cannon. And then the cannon, it looks like it's made of wire mesh, just sort of disintegrates. And you're thinking, what is that? But you're not so sure yet. You open your eyes, you look around, you're sleeping under the stars, as is tradition. You are a Hearthian, and you, in particular, are an astronaut. You talk to your friend Slate, who's sitting next to you, and you learn a little bit about your training. And before you go up, it's your first launch, big day, you've got to go get the launch codes from somebody named Feldspar up in the observatory. What I love about this is that this tutorial, we can call it that, takes you, the line to the observatory/museum isn't straight. You kind of go through their little village of Timber Hearth, which is the name of our planet. And as you do, you can talk to all of these villagers. Some of them just give you flavor text, like there's somebody that makes wine, and he's like, a good sap wine makes a great astronaut. And your character can say something like, I thought, that just gives you a stomach of steel. And they're like, details. Some of it's like that, but some of it will teach you the mechanics of the game. And to that end, I think this is a perfect tutorial. It teaches you literally everything you will need to be successful in this game. It does it linearly. It shows you rather than over-explains, which is a philosophy for teaching that I love and try to embody myself, and tried to whenever I used to teach as well. This letting students learn by discovering and trying rather than just explaining. They do that here. And if you ever play this on a new system, or if you ever start a new game for whatever reason, it's entirely optional. You can completely skip it.
Yep. I will say the only thing, because the different types of mechanics you have, movement, obviously piloting your ship, the signal scope, a bunch of other things that we'll talk about, but the piloting of the ship thing is the first one that you see on the planet. It's the first one you're able to do. This is, while I appreciate that they put this here because it does give you the tutorialization for flying your ship, I actually don't think it does a good job of teaching you how to fly your ship at all. I when I went back to replay it for this, I still had such a hard time flying the stupid little model. But the moment I got into my actual spaceship and flew off, I'm like, oh, this is just like riding a bike. I was able to kind of reteach myself. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't nearly as good as when I was, playing it continuously. But I don't really think the piloting the ship does a good, or the piloting the small model of the ship, I should say, does a good job of teaching you how the spaceship flies. I mean, it's the same mechanics, but I don't think it teaches it very well. I think everything else does. It just, the piloting the ship thing, I think, is one of the few parts of the game that I actually am not a fan of. Or piloting the model, excuse me.
It fails for 2 reasons, partly because of the POV. You're piloting from the third person, kind of like from the ground looking up at it. And then the acceleration is so much greater on this little model ship. Like it can zip pretty quickly. Whereas in your ship, it's much larger. The acceleration is slower. Yeah, I agree with you. It's significantly more difficult to pilot this little model ship. You can get a trophy or an achievement for landing this on the moon. Did you do that?
No, I did not know you could do that, actually.
Yeah, and when I say land, I really just mean like ram into the atmosphere of the moon and then it's gone. But yeah, you can do that. It's a nice little touch.
Awesome. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You are right, though. You also learn the other movements around here, like jumping. That's pretty straightforward. You have to hold in the jump button and then release it, sort of like bending and then jumping. And then the jetpack comes into play in what's called the 0G cave. You run into a Hearthian, whose name I can't remember, but you run into him and he'll ask you to, fix a satellite, and it's actually just like a floating pile of junk or whatever. And you can go down and fix it with this jetpack and the spacesuit. And it teaches you how you can use your thruster which goes in all directions, up, down, left, right, forward, back, and all of the diagonals there in between, as well as rotating full 360 degrees. And it can take some getting used to. I found it really helpful that there was that little global compass in the bottom that always showed which way you were thrusting, that and to what intensity. I found that to be pretty helpful. But it's definitely something that's better experienced rather than have explained to you. Very much a let the water teach you how to swim kind of scenario rather than reading a book about it.
Absolutely. I think, this game, if they just explained it to you in like text, it would not work at all. It's honestly, it's too complex to explain in writing. You just have to experience it. You have to try it out. And I think that little compass, like you're saying at the bottom, that shows the trajectory or the direction you're boosting and the intensity of the boost is incredibly helpful, especially later on for some of the some of the movement tech you need at the end of the game. It's very helpful. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, totally. And it's helpful too that the piloting your jetpack is functionally the same as your ship, just in a different sort of size. That's helpful too. Some of the other tutorials you get here are for your signal scope. You get this by playing hide and seek with these two younger Hearthians. And that's sort of like a telescope compass intertwined. You'll point it, you'll tune it into a frequency, you'll point it in a direction, and you'll get these little reticules on the screen. And if you line them up in the center, you'll hear something, usually music, and that'll sort of tell you in what direction something is. So here, the frequency is hide and seek, and you'll find these two little kids. Outside, it'll be the other astronauts that will get to on each planet. This is an invaluable tool. You'll want to use this basically constantly. Not just for that too, but also because it's a telescope that lets you zoom in, and you can, even pretty early in the game, start to see some interesting stuff out there in that universe.
It also is a tool for like kind of it adds to the mystery because it's on Timberhearth, so I don't feel like this is too much of a spoiler, but one of the astronauts is they mentioned there's an astronaut that's been lost. Like he's this legendary like astronaut that people can't seem to find. And I actually think it is Feldspar. Hornfels, I believe, is the astronaut you're getting the launch codes from.
Yes, I misspoke earlier.
When you said Feldspar, I'm like, I honestly, you corrected, you mentioned it further down in the notes, so you caught yourself on this one. But what I was going to say was what you find out later on, you point the signal scope and you see Feldspar in one spot and then at a different spot on Timberhearth as well. And that alone right there is like, how can he be in two locations at the same time? Really starts to pick at your brain and be like, what is actually happening here? And that's just from using, like, tinkering around with the signal scope.
Yeah, somebody asked me recently, like, how do you start with this game? And my answer is that I think this game gives you so many chances to say, I wonder what that's about. Yeah. And it's all about chasing those. So, and this is part of the tutorial, so let's just explain it now. One thing that you learn through talking to the folks around in your village is that there are other astronauts out there in their space program called Outer Wilds Ventures. It's Timberhearth's only space program. And there are a bunch of other astronauts out there. And the way that they keep track with one another is they use their signal scopes to pick up their music. Each of them, see, this is coming back. Each of them has an instrument. And by the way, these aliens are all genderless, but it's pretty easy to ascribe gender to things when you've been living in a Western culture for decades and decades. But there's Rebek is out there playing a banjo. Gabro has a flute, sort of a didgeridoo style flute. Chert has some bongos, congas, and Feldspar has a harmonica. And if you point your signal scope at different planets, you'll hear Rebek's banjo on one planet, or Chert's drums on another. And the second, I mentioned this thing in the sky was the first thing that grabbed me. The second thing that grabbed me was that you can hear the harmonica somewhere on Timberhearth, but also out in a very distant planet. And that's something we'll maybe touch on later. But your signal scope is very important. There are two other super important things. I just want to get to them before we talk about what happens next that are regarding the tutorial. One is detecting ghost matter using your camera. You've got a little camera as well as a little scout that you can shoot out, and you can take pictures. That's how you find this stuff called ghost matter, which we may or may not get to in this episode. Ghost matter will kill you if it touches you. It's just like this invisible green plasma. Yeah, no, you don't want to. You stay away. Bad news. But your other device that you get here is what's called a Nomai translation device. Part of this game is finding and discovering all you can about this race of beings known as the Nomai. They lived thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. We don't know where they came from. We don't really know what they look like all too well. And we just finally got a translation device. And that's something that we have on our person. And when we see Nomai writing, we can point at it and our thing will translate it. So let's, before we talk about the Nomai, let's walk up to the observatory.
Well, and sorry, real quick, I was just going to say the camera also has, besides just detecting ghost matter, it also has important scouting tools. It also has, it's also part of a solution to a puzzle later on that I don't want to spoil what it is just yet, but you do need that camera for more things than you would expect. And I just want to leave it at that, just as a little teaser for the listeners.
Definitely. So you're going through the village, you're walking up to the observatory. When you get up there, the first thing you see on your way in is this Nomai statue. It's a bust of a Nomai. And I guess we could talk about the Nomai a little bit now. At the beginning of the game, all we know is from this bust and what we see in the museum, that's also the observatory that we're about to walk into. All we know right now is that they lived thousands and thousands of years ago. They have an interesting writing system. They have ruins that are scattered around all these planets. We don't really know what they're for. And this bust of them is a statue that came from probably one of the first planets we're going to go to. Mm-hmm. And we could see a little bit of what they look like. They've got fur, they've got antlers, and they've got 3 eyes compared to our 4. Now, this is probably looking too far into it, but I think it's relevant to talk about. Something that I think of when we see beings with extra eyes, to me, when we see 4, that to me signifies either insects, like earthly insects, or just alien. Like 4 eyes, more than 4 eyes, that's alien, right? That's fantasy, science fiction. When we see 3 eyes, that, due in part to our culture, is significant, and Eastern cultures more so, is significant. That third eye is literally a third eye, yes, but spiritually and metaphorically, that third eye means something much deeper and is much more significant. Seeing this knowledge that is not readily available to the human experience, seeing that deep spiritual knowledge that ties everybody and everything together. That is significant. And the first thing that I thought of upon seeing this Nomai was, 1, they look pretty cool. 2, I wonder if that's significant. And it kind of is. One thing about this ending that's so good is that it doesn't tell you anything explicitly. It leaves it a little bit open. But I think this idea of a third eye being important is something to mention, because outside of, us being aliens, I don't think us having 4 eyes is that significant, but I do think 3 eyes is pretty noteworthy.
You could also make the argument, so 3 eyes thing, obviously in Eastern religions, also if you're going from a Judeo-Christian perspective, you have like the Holy Trinity, so I wonder if that also ties it. Like, not that the Nomai are like a Christian allegory by any stretch, but the Holy Trinity is 3, there's the third eye in other like cultures and religions, so like it feels like it kind of checks off boxes for like this spiritual race of people. And I almost wonder if, because you have 4 eyes, you're the next evolution of like what is to come, like the evolution of knowledge almost, because the way this game ends up telling the story of what's happening to you throughout this time loop that we've already flat out talked about. I almost wonder if like the Harthians are like, like maybe evolution or the universe or whatever you want to call it was like, okay, the Nomai ran their course, the Harthians are the next step, so now they have 4 eyes, they've evolved to the next step. That's all just, I'm reading just into that just because it's a very simplistic way to look at it. 4 is more than 3, but
I think you're onto something.
Maybe it's right on the head. I don't know.
No, I think you are onto something with this cyclical generational evolution with each new culture and each new species generation, however you'd like to frame it, however far zoomed in or out you want to go, does build off of and exist within the past. I mean, that's not to get too far ahead. That's a core theme of the game. That is in the message. And while it's, you could argue it's a little, whatever you want to say, well, 4 is more than 3. But I do think that is something that will come up soon. And it's a good observation. It's definitely something to keep in mind. There are a lot of exhibits here that I think are just terrific. You can see a plaque dedicated to the founding of Outer Wilds. You can see some exhibits about gravity and how that works. There's a slab of Nomai wall that broke off and is in here with some writing on it, as well as a very important glyph, though we don't know it yet. You could see a Nomai skeleton and some pieces of their art and pottery, an anglerfish specimen. You could see a gravity crystal, it's just so cool. It's just a purple crystal that's on a wall, and when you walk up to it, it changes the orientation, so you're now standing on the wall. These gravity crystals work that they hold you down onto whatever surface they're standing on. It's very, very cool. But the writing of the Nomai is also here. We get 2 little sentences, and the writing is just so fascinating, how it's set up.
One quick thing I want to comment on with the exhibits before we get to the writing was that, you talked before about how the game does such a good job of tutorializing the beginning, going through all the different mechanics. What I like about these exhibits, it's that it's also tutorializing the iterations of the mechanics that the game is going to throw at you. And I didn't realize it when I first played it, but when I first played it and went through exhibits, I'm like, okay, I don't know. I don't understand the context of what this museum is showing me, what all these exhibits are for. Once you beat the game and you go back and you play through it, if you decide to play a little bit more of it and just go back to Timberhearth and you go through these exhibits again, it's crazy how much they foreshadow the mechanics you're going to need to learn and that you learn through discovery. But they give you just enough here to kind of whet your appetite, as it were. But not enough that it actually spoils what the puzzle is. And that's why I really like this exhibit, where it kind of gives you a taste of what's to come, but never too much.
Yeah, definitely. With the crystal, even with the gravity, with the anglerfish, it's showing a lot of what we are going to be experiencing over the next several hours.
Mm-hmm.
The writing of the Nomai is very neat. It's shown in the game as a sort of scribbling spiral. And like we had mentioned, our translator can just be pointed at it and it will show us what they're saying. This writing here mentions that they're searching for something. They're scientifically searching for something in the universe. We don't know much else other than that. But the way that the writing works is it spirals into itself, and when a new person speaks or when a new clause is started, it sort of breaks off. And so the end result of a conversation is sort of a series of spirals that are just blooming out of each other, which, kind of you can extrapolate that, or what's the opposite of extrapolate? Bring back in to the to the theme of everybody building off of those who have come before. This is on a very local level, just in a conversation, but everything is blooming out of what's come before it. Which is something that gets reiterated upon throughout this game. I think it's just so fascinating. I've heard this likened to a message board too, right? Like a parent comment with a child comment and a child comment. I could kind of see that. I prefer the artsy fartsy explanation that I just gave than an internet message board. But,
I like that more too. We can proclaim that as gospel for this game. That's what it is.
Yeah, if there's one thing about Outer Wilds, it's that there is one correct meaning for everything.
The way, the truth, and the dark bramble.
Yeah, exactly. No interpretation here. Just read what we write, and that's it. Once you're done looking at the exhibits, and they're very fun. There's even one, if you don't have the DLC, that'll say coming soon. And there's a little cheeky note, like if you'd like the work that Outer Wilds Ventures does, then consider becoming a patron. And it's nice. But we get the launch codes here from Hornfels, the museum curator. And, we get some words of encouragement. He asks us what we're looking forward to. And then as we're leaving to go back to the launch pad, the Nomai statue turns to us on its own and opens all 3 of its eyes. all at once that are, you likened it to the Holy Trinity. They are, I think it should be said, arranged in a triangle shape, not just in a line up or down. It's in a triangle, which holds deep significance, even external to Christianity. But they all open, they begin glowing, and we see what looks like those Nomai writing spirals kind of drifting between the two of us. It's very ethereal. And we see our memories from when we started the game. Literally everything we've done up to that moment play in reverse as the statue looks at us. And within just a moment or two, it's all over. The statue's eyes are still opened, of course, and it's still looking at us, but we don't really know what happened. We just know that it opened its eyes, and we tell somebody about it, and they're like, whoa, Hornfels has been trying to do that for a while. Wow, this is exciting. I wonder what it means. And we get our first little clue here. This person, I forget, I don't think it's Slate. I forget, maybe it's Gan or Han or Hal. There's somebody with a 3-letter name, Harthian, that's up here, that says that he suggests talking to Gabbro. Remember, Gabbro is the one with the flute. Gabbro is on a planet called Giant's Deep, and he suggests talking to Gabbro about these statues. So, with all of that, we've got our codes, our launch codes. We've got some iteration of where to go, and we've got more than a few questions. The game says we've given you all the tools. Now, let your childlike sense of wonder take over and explore. One thing that they do to help you, though, is in your ship, you've got a map. You've got a map of the solar system, but you've also got a rumor map. And the rumor map looks way more akin to like the Charlie Kelly, Pepe Sylvia board with strings going across every little thing. Mm-hmm. But you can also view all of these entries in the standard map too, and they'll be divvied up by planets. And what this does is it'll show you every piece of information you've gathered. And if you haven't discovered anything related to it, it'll be a question mark. If you have, like let's say you heard of something called the Southern Observatory and you've been there, then it'll be pictured there. And it'll give you a succinct little summary of all the information you know. And if there's more to learn in that area, it'll say there's more to learn here. And that's how the game kind of helps you keep everything straight. This is so important. And my first run that ended in failure, like I burnt out on this game when I first tried it, I wasn't using this at all. And it's no wonder I never got through it because I wasn't engaging with the help that they were offering me.
It is very necessary to have that like information map because there is just too much information to track for you, and it kind of is a little bit of a roguelike in a sense because we already mentioned there's a time loop and how it retains the information that you learn from each iteration through the time loop. So I mean it's a roguelike in the sense that you start over from the beginning every time, and you kind of like if you were on a planet and the time loop resets, then obviously you start back from the beginning of where we'll get into where you kind of spawn, I guess, in a second. But, all right, well, you spawn back on Tiberhearth. I guess that's pretty obvious. But the only thing that is consistent from between all that is just the information, just the knowledge that you've obtained from your previous outing, almost like passing knowledge down through the generations, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, and for me, my first foray out like into space, I won't dive into a specific planet, but one of the things this game is not afraid to do is to kill you. And I think that is an amazing thing actually, because it just kind of, it just makes it that much more impactful. But like flying your spaceship, it is very easy to fly into the sun. It is very easy to fly into a planet and just crash because you're going too fast. It is somewhat realistic in terms of, we mentioned before, like it's a physics model. It's the same thing goes for the spaceship. If you are flying too fast to a planet and you don't use your retro rockets to slow down, you will crash and die into the planet. It has happened more times than I care to admit.
It's very true. The universe is very hostile toward you, but in a detached sort of way.
Yeah.
You are existing within the laws of nature. How hostile those end up being toward you is dependent on how you respect them. Sort of exactly like real life, right? Yep. You know, the tiger doesn't know that it's a vicious beast. It's just a tiger. It just is. We attribute those adjectives to it because of how we interact with them, right? Mm-hmm. Nature is just nature. And that's part of this too. Speaking of exploring, though, we don't know that we're in a loop yet. That is one thing that we spoiled because it's something that's known about the game. So at first, when we're given the launch codes, our goal is to just learn more about the Nomai, explore wherever we want. I think the three most common areas to explore first are Timber Hearth, the Adderlock, which is what the name of our Timber Hearth's moon is, as well as Giant's Deep. That's where Gabbro is. We've been told that's where Gabbro is. It's not the closest planet, but it is the one that we've been directed to. So what I figured we could do is let's talk a little bit about what we can find on Timber Hearth first, because it's pretty close, and then we'll go to the moon. There's just a few things on each of these. In Timber Hearth, we can explore the landscape a little bit. It's very much, it's in the name. It's very similar to Earth, right? Hearth, Earth. It's the same sort of etymological lineage. It's very green. The hills, there's not like hills, but there's just rolling green, and there are beautiful stone mountains and geysers. Timber Hearth has geysers, quite a few of them. But we can find a couple of things of interest here. One, we can find, there's one that I'm going to save maybe till next episode. I don't think we're going to have time to get to it here. The quantum stuff. So let's put a pin in that.
Sounds good.
We see a giant crater with this like thorny thing with brambles and thorns branching out of it. Looks like a Disney evil Maleficent kind of thing from Kingdom Hearts 2 spanning out. I'm playing through that right now, which is why I thought of it. But it's this weird giant ball of thorns, and it's crashed and it's causing a crater, and the thorns are everywhere. And if we go down, we can talk. There's another Hearthian down there. They're like, yeah, this probably came from a planet called Dark Bramble. We haven't been there yet. We don't really know too much about what's going on. No big deal. But what's interesting to me is that, and this is one of the first things I did, and it blew my mind a little bit. If you point your signal scope at it, you hear the harmonica that Feldspar plays. And you're thinking, hold on. Feldspar's been reported missing for years and years and years. He's this legendary pilot. There's an exhibit dedicated to the first launch, and he's revered, and he's been missing for so long because he's just so adventurous that he went where nobody's gone before, and he's been missing, and we're all deeply hoping he comes back. And suddenly, if we point our signal scope to this thing, clear as a bell, well, clear as a harmonica, there's Feldspar, or at least what we can hear of him. So immediately you're like, that can't be right. And I do want to save Dark Bramble stuff for the next episode, but this immediately I was like, oh, something's going on in here. Did you do the same thing?
I did. I didn't do Timber Hearth first, but when I did do that and I found the Dark Bramble like seed, that as it were, or whatever this thing is, I did do the same thing. I also shot the camera, like how you have the camera that can just for detecting space matter or ghost matter. Yeah, ghost matter. Sorry.
Yeah, I admit I did not do this until I went to Dark Bramble and saw that trick in action. Then I came back here and I was like, oh yeah, I could have figured that out a long time ago.
Well, without spoiling Dark Bramble, I didn't use shooting the camera into the Dark Bramble seed on Timber Hearth to solve Dark Bramble. I'll save that for our Dark Bramble conversation.
Well, I think I think you could talk about it here because you have the tools to do this here.
Yeah, well, so all that it was, what I was going to say wasn't like, I just don't want to spoil how I figured out Dark Bramble, like how to navigate that planet. What I did do here, though, was you get to see I was able to see Feldspar through this. Like I fired it, and what happens is if you keep hitting the trigger button, it takes another picture or whatever button it is for the action button is for the camera.
As the drone is firing, you fire it flies, and the more you press the right shoulder button, the more pictures you take. So you get a sort of slideshow in real time.
Like a stop motion animation almost of like what's happening. Yeah. And so, you're going through it. And so then I could see a campfire, and I couldn't see Feldspar directly because it was a little too far away. But then I saw trees and other stuff. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, how, like, can I walk into this thing? You can't. Like from Timber Hearth, you can't. There's another way into it. But it was just so, like, I remember seeing that and then being so confused. And then once again, because once you shoot your camera on, like, when you're in your space suit, there'll be a little display on your HUD that shows where it is, kind of like in relation to where it is in the solar system. So like you would shoot it out and then you would see it going through the dark bramble seed, but then, you know, in the top left or whatever corner that it was actually supposed to be at, you would just see a little notification pop up that it's like, you know, like however many kilometers away or meters away. And I was just like, what, how is it? I just shot it in here, but now I'm seeing it in a completely different spot. And it just, you know, the game captures your imagination so easily just alone with this one tiny little, section of Timberhearth of just making things appear in two different locations.
Yeah. At first you're thinking something like maybe this is a portal or something. Somehow. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's one interesting thing here. Another interesting thing on Timberhearth is you can find this mining site, and it's in the Nomai ruins. There are some ruins here on Timberhearth, and you can read the translation of the writing on the entrance. It's mining site 2B. And inside, it's this big mining operation. Well, it's been out of commission for a very, very long time, but you gather that they were doing something for something called the Ash Twin Project. And this is potentially the first time you're hearing about this. We don't know anything about it. All we know is that they're mining here for this, and they're mining a lot of metal. These mines are very rich in metal ore, and one of the Nomai named Coleus, wrote down, quote, "I'm relieved by our clan's decision to use Timberhearth's ore only for constructing the shell. If eventually life on this planet were to evolve to the point of advanced metallurgy, I'm confident we won't have destroyed their ability to create." So what we're seeing here is we don't know what this is or what the shell is. We don't know anything of that, but these people, the Nomai, came way before us. And we can actually find another little Easter egg down here. If you swim all the way to the bottom of this water area, you can see writing of the Nomai talking about encountering this primitive species that lives in water, and they painted a mural of it. It's two Nomai in their like Nomai spacesuit. It kind of looks like a sort of like a religious altar wear or like, you know, colorful pope wear or something. It shows, this mural does, two Nomai seeing primitive Hearthians, these little tadpoles crawling out of the water. So one, that tells us that we're amphibious creatures, which turns out is actually important. We came from water. And two, it shows the Nomai were here thousands and thousands and thousands of years before we ever were even conceived of.
It also kind of, like, that little bit of text also gives a glimpse into the type of race the Nomai are. The fact that they can look at like a planet, see life is on this planet, and be like, well, we don't want to strip this planet for its resources because that's going to hurt the future generation that will eventually evolve on this planet. And that's super important because as we find out at the ending of this game, that honestly kind of helped them in the end, or what's right. I don't want to say any more than that. It helps them in the end, and you'll see why. But you get a glimpse at the type of creatures they are. They aren't just conquerors, as as Alex Beecham said. They are very altruistic, where they are just there to explore and learn. And you don't know quite why they're there yet, except, like, is it for exploration? Is it for learning? Is it something else? But at the very least, you get a glimpse of like who they are kind of at their core. Well,
sort of. I would argue that there's a pretty big characterization of them that comes up that is a bit of a red herring. But we don't know anything about it yet. As of right now, yes, if this is the first thing we see, they are exploring for the sake of science discovery, and that's it. They're not looking to hurt anybody or conquer anything. They just want to find out what's out there. And speaking of what's out there, the next place we might go is the Adderlock. That's our moon, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a ton more to explore on Timberhearth for now. So if we fly up to the moon, it's a very, very short trip away in our spaceship. We could find Esker. Esker is a Hearthian that is manning the lunar station, which apparently is not really talked all that much about or taught to the new astronauts, because he says he's very lonely. Nobody ever stops to visit him because the ships have gotten advanced enough now where they're not breaking down constantly, so they don't need to make pit stops here. Very interesting. This is a typical moon. It's very dark, no gravity. You can find a recording from Chert here. Chert makes his little field recordings and leaves them around places. You can find them. There's a lot of ice around here that match some samples that Chert found from Dark Bramble. and Chert believes that this ice here is from the planet that was originally there for Dark Bramble, when Dark Bramble took it over. Dark Bramble, we haven't really talked about. It's the farthest planet away, and it looks like, well, it looks exactly like what it is. It looks like this planet that has exploded and is being held together in only a few sparse pieces by this like sprawling black limb vine stuff. And in the middle, there's this seed that looks exactly like the one in Timber Hearth. So they call it Dark Bramble. Dark Brandon. And we can see Chert is saying that the planet that used to be there before Bramble exploded it, these samples here on the moon are matching that. Between this and Timber Hearth, something about Dark Bramble is very weird, very sinister. We don't really know yet. It's far away. We might not even be thinking about it, but something's weird.
I also love when you first see the Adderlock, where we're learning all this. When you first test out the signal scope and you zoom in, you can actually listen to Esker, and it's one of my vivid memories of first playing this is seeing the moon in orbit around Timber Hearth, and you just following it with your signal scope and zooming in, and you can see like the campfire as the planet rotates on its axis or whatever, and you just hear the whistle. It's a very like, it's not haunting, but it's very like mood setting. Like you just it really kind of sets the tone for what the game is trying to get at. Like this man by himself, the person, thing, creature by itself, just whistling around a campfire on a moon, just traveling in space. It's very atmospheric.
It's giving you the feeling that a lot of us in modern society don't get on the everyday, that the universe is immeasurably large. It is vast beyond our comprehension. And even in this small moment, just from here to the moon, we get that feeling of like, oh, there's somebody that's all the way up there, just existing. We're all the way down here. It's both beautiful and terrifying, that feeling. Even just like in real life, looking up in the nighttime, something even as a kid, like I was huge on constellations. That's partly, some kids are truck kids and some kids are dinosaur kids. Like I was a space kid. I loved constellations and stars and planets. And like, even now as a 32-year-old, I go outside and I look up and I'll see like, Jupiter or Mars or the constellation Orion or whatever. And it's like, they are so far away that even in their vast, huge size, they look like pinpricks. And it's just, it gives you a sort of cold awe, right? This feeling of like reverence but also fear. Like you can't help but respect it because of how terrifying it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Man, you left me speechless on that one.
I tend to do that if you let me talk enough. Like eventually you're just like, geez, you stole all the words. I don't know what else to say.
I mean, I don't have the vocabulary you do, man. You find ways to eloquently. One thing, and I know this might embarrass you a little bit. One thing I admire about your show is how, and you as a host specifically, is how you're able to articulate the emotions I feel about games, but I don't necessarily always have the words for them. So one of the many reasons I enjoy listening to your show is for that reason.
Oh, thank you, man. That's really nice of you to say. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. And real quick, just because you brought it up too, I just want to, I was also kind of a space kid, but my interests as a kid switched pretty rapidly. I was into dinosaurs for a little while, and then I was really into, for some reason, just animal categorization, like the animal kingdom, just the idea of, like the different animal species and which family of animal. I don't remember any of that at all, but I remember being really interested in it. And then eventually it was space too, like just constellations specifically. I love the idea of like art in the stars. And so I remember being obsessed with trying to find like Orion's belt. I can still find Orion's belt pretty easily, but if you ask me where Ursa Major is, that's a little bit harder for me to find. Though I think it's just the Big Dipper too. So I was
gonna say an easy trick for Ursa Major is just if you can see the Big Dipper, if it's that time of the year, whatever hemisphere you're in, then there you go. That's Ursa Major.
Yeah, and then Ursa Minor is the Little Dipper along with the North Star. So I remember a lot of that type of stuff. But like, if you ask me to search for like other constellations that I can't even remember other than those three off the top of my head. I know there's hundreds of others, right? Like hundreds, but like it just, as a kid, it always just captured my imagination that like, thousands of years ago, people looked up the stars and kind of interpreted art and like religion out of it. And this game definitely kind of scratches that itch in a sense, but instead of constellations, it's the just kind of like what each planet has to offer almost, but we'll get into all that.
Yeah. While you're up here on the moon, a good tip to give to new players of this is to explore the North and South Pole on every single planet. Something that's a tiny bit annoying is when you're in your ship, you don't see the map that shows the North and South Pole. It's only when you get out and you're in your spacesuit, which means you're using your limited resources of oxygen and jetpack fuel. Just a minor annoyance, but it's you can work around it. But visiting the North and South Pole on every single planet is very recommended. There's always something there. And so too here on the moon. So, and by the way, I might get these mixed up. They're categorized by red and blue, not N and S. So like, I kind of lost track after a while. But on one of the poles here, there's notes from Esker. There's like a journal from Esker, the guy manning the moon station, the Whistler. He's, writing in entries. He's checking on folks with the signal scope. Oh, today I heard Rebeck. I couldn't hear him for the past few days. I'm glad that he's doing okay. Oh, I'm spying on the folks of Timberhearth. I could hear them flirting from up here. Somebody should tell them that's shameful. Things like that. But if you haven't noticed the Dark Bramble thing with Feldspar's harmonica, he writes about it here. He says, I can hear it in Dark Bramble where he's rumored to be lost. Why can I also hear it on Timberhearth? Something in my equipment must be wrong. Something weird is going on here. No, I hear it today too. I don't know what's going on. And then it just sort of ends. So if you haven't found that little tidbit, you might find it here. On the South Pole, though, there are Nomai ruins. Big Nomai ruins. And this is where I first learned about this thing called the Eye of the Universe. Not much is really known about it at this time if you came here first. But this seems to be why the Nomai came to this general area of space. They built a locator here, and it wasn't quite working right. They built one on another planet called Ember Twin, and then they decided to go to the South Pole on another planet called Brittle Hollow. Now, that's, again, we're piecing the story together bit by bit here, but the Eye of the Universe is super important. This is introduced in Brittle Hollow, which I don't think we're going to get to today, but let's talk about the Eye of the Universe. I might even scroll down a little bit to my notes where I actually wrote this. This is why they came here, and we learn about this a little bit. They saw this signal, they found this signal that called out to them, they thought. We'll talk more about this as we explore. It was older than the universe itself. This is the most significant detail. And I'm quoting the rest of the writing here. It goes on. No Nomai has ever encountered anything like it. How can anything in this universe be older than the universe itself? Imagine what rare and profound knowledge it might offer. We must find this Eye of the Universe. And then they also wrote that the signal that it put out looked round. Now, we're going to learn way, way more about this, but this in and of itself, just this little bit that we learn here, we didn't even learn what I just read. Like that comes from another planet. I just wanted to be dramatic here. This Eye of the Universe is something so mysterious, and even after completing the game, it's one of those things where they never outright tell you. They don't tie up the bow and hand you the present at the very end and say, now, wasn't that a nice story? This is open-ended, and the Eye of the Universe is this unknowable quantum universal knowledge, this event almost that sort of exists as a metaphor for the continual search of knowledge. I don't know, but this is what they were searching for. They came here for this.
It almost is a metaphor too for just like science's search and study of our universe, in that we don't 100% know how our universe came to exist. Like,
yeah,
the theory is the Big Bang is one of the theories. I'm sure there's a bunch that you would know more about than I would, Rick. But like, it's it's kind of signal, like the eye of the universe is the idea of that no matter how much science we have, at least currently, who knows what will happen in the future years as science continues to evolve and learn more things about our universe. But the eye of the universe is so hard to locate in this game for a good reason. It's undefined, and it's left ambiguous on purpose, like you were saying. And I was thinking about it. I was looking up, trying to remember how this game ended. I watched a replay of the ending just so I could remember what exactly happens. And I also read like the kind of like story synopsis in a weird sense on Wikipedia. And it's like none of that, like going through it, I'm like, oh, okay, I understood a bits of this ending that I didn't get beforehand, but it still doesn't answer the question of what is the eye of the universe? Where did it come from? What is its purpose? Does it have a purpose? And that is wonderful that it doesn't answer those questions, because it's one of those things where no one could. And the Nomai almost are representative of, science desperately trying to find maybe the reason for existence, maybe the origin of the universe. And it's this unknowable thing, at least as of right now. But, this game is made in our current world, and as of right now, it's unknowable. So the eye of the universe is also unknowable.
It almost makes you wonder if, like, as you're searching for it, if this is knowledge that we should be searching for, if this is something that is knowable, or if we are going to become victims of hubris, right? It's kind of like, that idea of the tiger that I said earlier. Like, the tiger doesn't know that it's a vicious beast. It's just a tiger. We only ascribe that because of, how we choose to interact with it. It's kind of like that, this knowledge, whatever this is exists. It just does. And it's not deeper than that. It just exists. We ascribe everything to it in our search for knowledge. And it becomes this idea of, are we going too far, right? Are we on wax wings flying too close to the sun? I think is that myth. I don't actually know. But it's like, should we be looking for this, or are we getting ourselves into trouble?
And without spoiling too much, the Nomai, some of the stuff the Nomai have to do in attempts to, or some of the stuff the Nomai do in attempts to find the eye of the universe, really kind of ties in with that thought you have, Rick, of like, are we flying too close to the sun? How much is too much? Like, what price are we willing to pay for this knowledge?
Absolutely. Well said. That's the Adderlock. The Adderlock it's not very big. You can fly around it pretty easily without your ship. Esker is there. You can always go back and re-talk to these people. But at some point, you're going to be exploring for about 22 minutes. And around the 20-minute mark, you're going to hear this track that's playing here. I love the track that plays when the sun begins to go supernova. I didn't even key into that's when this triggered every time. It took me a few loops to realize, but this musical cue begins, and once it's over, the sun explodes. I gotta tell you about the first time this happened to me. I was on another planet at this point. I had just finished talking to Gabbro on Giant Steep, and every Hearthian will have a campfire set up next to them. They all put up campfires and they roast marshmallows, which you can do too. You can roast marshmallows. And what I was doing was I just talked to Gabbro, and I lit the campfire, and I was roasting a marshmallow, and all of a sudden the screen just turned white from the outside in, and my screen went black, and I was like, what just happened? The sun had gone supernova as I was roasting the marshmallow. I didn't know that was going to happen. I genuinely didn't know anything about this game going in. And my jaw was on the floor, and then, the animation plays of the Nomai mask looking at you and replaying all of your memories, and suddenly you wake up again, and this is the time loop. You wake up 22 minutes ago, everything is the way it was. You could talk to the guy at the campfire that you're with at the very beginning of the game, and you could be like, did I just die? And they're like, it's questions like that make us really wonder if we should be sending you up into space and not somebody else. Like, nobody knows. Nobody is any the wiser, but you just died and were reincarnated, basically thrown back into time. You still have all your memories, your ship log stays updated, but everything else is reset. I could not have asked for a better introduction to this. I was a guffawed. I was I was gobsmacked.
What's funny is that there is only what's interesting about this game is that because of this time loop, there is very few ways for you to actually game over, but you can actually get a game over in this game. Did that ever happen to you?
Oh yeah. We'll talk about it, but
without
spoiling
without spoiling the end, the ways to do it towards the end of the game, towards the beginning of the game, and you don't understand why this is yet. If you die before getting the Nomai statue that turns to look at you, you get a game over. We're not going to explain just yet as we go through each planet and you learn more of the lore. Well, it explains it to you, but that happens. I'm like, oh well, that sucks. And then when the supernova happened, though, I was so confused. And I mentioned before how I started kind of poking around at the edges of the game once this happened. I thought I did something wrong the first time this happened. I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't go to this planet right now, and that's why the sun exploded. And then I went to a different planet, and then the sun still exploded. And it wasn't until like the third time I'm like, oh, this is just a loop now. Like, it took me that long to realize that this just will always happen every 22 minutes like clockwork. It went right over my head the first time, the first few cycles that I played through.
Yeah. Especially I could see if you do somehow, like if you jump off a geyser or something and die before the statue looks at you, and you get a game over in credits, and you're like, what the hell is that?
Yep.
What's really freaking cool, and this is such a little touch, is that depending on how you die, when the loop resets, your opening gasp of breath will change. So like if you suffocate or drown, the gasp is really like wrangled, and strained. Whereas if you sleep or if you meditate, which we're going to learn in a second here, when you wake up, it's just very normal, very chill. Such a cool touch. And like if you crash, if there's something like you crash into something and it's like an immediate death, you just kind of wake up. It's very neat.
Does the meditation thing, is that the thing where you can like jump forward in the time, like it'll count the seconds or whatever?
No. Okay. No. Let's talk about that now, because we learned that by going to Giant's Deep. And we talked to Gabbro there. Gabbro is the flute player, right? Didgeridoo. And after a few loops, after one loop, after two loops, if you talk to Gabbro, you could be like, hey, like we were told that you brought that Nomai statue back. And he'll say, yeah, I found them here on this island. Craziest thing, one of them looked at me. And you could be like, no way, it looked at me too. Nobody else saw it though. And Gabbro will be like, that's cool. Hey, by the way, I think I'm in a time loop. And you could be like, me too, dude. And this is where you realize that Gabbro is the only other person that is aware of this loop. And coincidentally, he's the only other person where a statue looked at him. These are most definitely linked, and we learn more about that soon. But Gabbro will teach you to meditate. There are 2 ways to pass time in this game. Well, 3 ways to pass time. One, you could just stand there. Tried and true, good old fashioned. 2, you could rest at a campfire. This will, in addition to roasting marshmallows, you can take a nap. And as you're doing that, the timer will count up, the seconds. It's like 2-3 times the speed. And you could pass time that way. It'll always wake you up right as the last track starts playing, I'm pretty sure. So you can't just sleep through the supernova. But if Gabbro teaches you to meditate, I can't believe they hid this, as a game mechanic. I'm learning that like little frustrations like this, or like the frustrations of navigating Brittle Hollow, in the moment bug the hell out of me. But like as a whole, just as a gamer, that stuff, like I don't even consider that when thinking about games like this. Like it's almost immaterial. But I'm distracting. Anyway, Gabbro will teach you to meditate. And what that does is it'll immediately send you into the next loop. You close your eyes and you get the memory animation that unfortunately plays at the end of every single loop. You don't have to wake up right before the sun goes supernova. It just puts you into the next one. This is a must-have. Like, I cannot imagine doing this game without that.
I genuinely did not know meditation was an option. I don't think I ever
Wait,
got
are
it.
You serious?
I'm dead serious.
Dude.
When you wrote that in your notes and said, like, I can't imagine the game without this, I'm like, I don't remember finding it. I don't ever remember, or if I did, I never used it. I had no idea.
The thing that makes this good is that, like, yes, a campfire will take you into the last if you doze off. One, you have to wait. Like, you have to watch the timer go up, and it'll always wake you up right before the sun goes supernova. With meditation, it can be used anywhere. Like with the campfire, you have to find a campfire, you have to light it. With meditation, you could literally be hurtling towards the sun and just press pause, choose meditate, click yes, and then that's it. You're done. And what this ended up being to me functionally was like, I would go to a planet, I would find the one thing that I was looking for, like in my ship log, the question mark or the there's more to explore here. I would get that journal updated message up top, and then I would just meditate. I would say, okay, time for the next loop.
Wow, I had to wait for my existential death every 22 minutes, the entire playthrough. That is wild.
Yeah, this is clutch. I really wish they would have made this a forced encounter, because the thing is like all of these astronauts we're going to find, they all have different personalities. And Gabbro is very chill, you know, like when you first get to Giant's Deep, which we'll talk about here in a second, you could be like, what's up with this planet? And he goes, yeah, I know, right? And then he says, oh, wait, you actually want to hear about it. Okay. And in the face of, you know, certain death, he just kind of zens out and meditates, and he'll teach you if you ask him. Which is very cool. But yeah, I really wish they would have forced this just so everybody can have it. It's just so convenient.
I wonder, so I'm trying to look it up to see, like, was this added after my initial playthrough? Like, was there an update to the game where, you know, they got feedback from players and they're like, oh, maybe this would be beneficial to add like this meditation mechanic? I don't know. I don't know if that was the case. Now, I want to real quick comment on Giant's Deep itself, because that was one of the first, you know, this planet where you meet Gabbro, you get meditate. That was one of the first planets where when I flew to it, I audibly gasped because of how it's so evocative. Like you hear some descriptions of it, I believe, on Timberhearth about what some of the different planets are like. Giant's Deep has like this very thick layer of gas on the outside. It's kind of dark green, lots of kind of like yellow greens. Like it's a little bit darker in tone.
Yeah, you think it's going to be like a gas giant like Jupiter, and you're just going to go like right through it.
Yeah, but you fly into it, and it's this stormy ocean with tornadoes everywhere, all over the place. And you fly into, you're like, what did I just get myself into? And then you crash into the water, and it doesn't hurt your ship, which is nice. Like you could fly into that pretty quickly. I wonder if you fly in at full speed, will it kill you on impact? I would not be surprised knowing this game.
Okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but right. Backing up, this planet has a few layers. It's got the gas outer layer that you mentioned. It's got the ocean layer that's the raging storms. And then beneath it, there's a core. And the core is surrounded by like some kind of a force field. We don't know. And you can't get into that. Like you could drive your ship down and below. You can't penetrate the core. Gabbro says, yeah, I tried. Don't bother. Can't do it. There is a way to break through it without doing the normal trick. You can shoot your ship through it.
I did not know that. I think I followed the mechanics the way that the game intended. I'm not sure. I didn't know about you could shoot your ship through it.
One thing that I tried doing and ended in me dying immediately was, so there is an eject button on your ship. Did you see this?
Yeah, I died accidentally.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the spacesuit on, and then I ejected into a planet that had no gas, or no air, excuse me, and I died and asphyxiated pretty quickly.
Yeah. My thought was, so with the ejection button, you press it to raise the glass and then press it again, and then it shoots your cockpit out like super fast. So I was like, oh, what if I start at the opposite end of the solar system, drive at Giant's Deep, like reaching 1,500, 1,800 kilometers per hour or whatever, and, you know, I'll get ready, and once I'm inside the atmosphere, I'll hit eject and I'll shoot. I didn't think ahead to, such that this game is kind of physics accurate. And what happened was, you know, I'm going to 2,000 kilometers an hour. I get out of my seat, I unbuckle, I raise the eject button, and as soon as I enter the atmosphere, I'm shot forward into the windshield of the ship. Everything breaks, and I immediately die. Yeah, so I was like, well.
I love that. So this game is not afraid to just let you experiment and hurt yourself in ways that you probably would never expect.
Yep. I mean, it is such an embodiment of nature is only violent if you choose to engage with it as such. Like, it'll kill you.
Oh, when we get to the Ash Twin planets, I guess that's what they're called. One of the most gruesome deaths of my entire playthrough occurred on that planet, which I'll save for when we get to that. I think that's next episode or maybe later this one. I don't know anymore. But yeah, man, this game, like, in a weird sense, I kind of love how brutal it is because it fits with the theme so well. I don't know. It's mean, but in a very fun way.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I completely agree. Here's what I think we'll do. Let's talk a little bit about Giant Steep, and we'll pick up and finish it here next time. But
okay.
We already talked a little bit about the core. We can maybe save that till next time, partly because I forgot to write down what was down there, and now I don't quite remember. And then that cannon that we see shooting off at the beginning is actually around here. We could talk about that next time. But there are some other cool things to find here. If you can navigate the currents and the 2x gravity, which was a bit of a pain at first.
Mm-hmm.
The area that's immediately accessible is on one of the other islands. It's called the construction yard. This is actually where my first attempt at the game ended because I got so frustrated. I kept getting knocked out, and I wasn't meeting the game where it was at. But the construction yard, I think we learned retroactively that it's called that. We go here. My gravity crystals are at work here with some of these platforms that help whenever, because one thing I guess we didn't mention about Giant Steep is one of the myriad cyclones, water cyclones, will come through, grab the islands, because this planet only has 4 islands, and will throw the islands up into space. And this happened to me when I was talking to Gabbro. I was talking to him, and all of a sudden the conversation ended, and I started floating away, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? And we were in space. Which can be a problem because then you come back down through the atmosphere and, you can get yourself killed.
Splat.
Yeah. The construction yard is where I found the Nomai had anticipated this. They experienced it, and they built these these platforms you stand on, and a beam of light comes around you whenever the cyclones come, and it'll hold you down with gravity crystals so you don't get hurt. It's amazing. It's so cool. The Nomai, it's one of those situations where like society, time has passed so far that technological advancement has kind of dovetailed around, and we're catching up to the past in that way. I mean, again, Mobius, I mean, this wasn't planned, but Mobius Digital having that name is perfect. It's so perfect for this game in ways that like, it feels like fate. Like maybe I do believe in God now. I don't know. That came out wrong. You know what I mean?
I know what you meant.
Maybe. But the construction yard here, we learn about something called the orbital probe cannon through the writing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what that is at this time. What we do learn is that for some reason it didn't fire because there was some issue with the proposed power source. Weird. There's also a hint here about how to get to the core, because the Nomai were fixated on this too. They're like, we can't get to the core. And then one of them wrote like, hey, we accidentally dropped one of the pieces to the orbital probe cannon into the water, and it sank below the core. They were like, how did that happen? That's so cool. And then another Nomai will chime in and be like, hey, like I actually figured this out. If you come over to the high energy lab or Southern Observatory, wherever it is on Brittle Hollow, like I can show you. Like I can show you the formula and how it works. I set up a demonstration. And they were like, why'd you do that? And they were like, I wanted to set up the demonstration. That's something else that I guess we haven't mentioned. Man, in so many ways I feel like I really wish I could just dedicate 5 to 7 episodes on this game. I really do. But the writing of the Nomai in here, it's very cute. Like they're focused on scientific discovery first and foremost, but they're very funny about it. Like they make puns and they make all these jokes, and they speak kind of funny. Like one of them says like, hey, this didn't work. And somebody else will say, I hope you're pulling my locomotive limb here, which, it's all like that. It's very endearing. I came to really love these guys, even though there's so many of them talking, and actually like 3 generations of them from what you find that I kind of lost track of who was who, but I love them all the same.
The writing in this game is incredibly it's outstanding because like imagine having to I think it was, who was it? Alex Beecham was the director. It was his sister, Kelsey Beecham, I believe, who did the writing for this. And imagine having to write a world this complex with the narrative this game presents. But it has to be all non-linear, and it has to be able to be presented in a way that, like, no matter when you start reading the journals, the player will be able to figure stuff out. Thinking back on, like, and granted, I'm not a writer, but just like thinking back at how hard it would be to write something like this just blows my mind, because like you can't account for where players are going to go first or second or third or this and that, and you just have to be able to write it in a sense that like people will understand what you're talking about no matter where in the playthrough you're at.
I can't imagine how they put all this together. It had to have been just such a Herculean task. Man, it's so good. This game is a marvel. And I have way more, like once we get to the other planets, I took down way more quotes from the Nomai. So we're going to hear more from them, from their own writing. It's just this one I happen to not. Speaking of, there are just two more things that I want to talk about before we end for today. And then I think next time we'll pick it back up. One is the statue workshop. Now, it took me a little bit to figure out how to do this. You can see this, you can go into one of the caves and you can see the statue workshop like down below. You can see it through a grate, but there's no way to get in. And you can find writing from kids, which, by the way, I love that the Nomai writing done by kids is noticeably sloppier than when the ones the adults write. That's so cute. But the kids are talking like, hey, yeah, you know, they told us we can't go into the statue workshop because they're working. And then another kid will say, but what if we tried the other way? And you could be like, what do you mean the other way? And if you swim below the island, just jump in the water and swim below it, you can come up in the middle. It's kind of like there's a hole on the bottom, like a donut, kind of. And you could swim up underneath it. And that's how you get to the statue workshop. And in here, you see all of these busts, like the one what was on Timber Hearth, the one that Gabbro found that's still sitting outside on this island. And here we learn kind of what these are. Through the writings, we learn that they pair the Nomai, or us, I think they say any living being, and transmit the memories back to the corresponding storage unit on Ash Twin. One of them writes, quote, see how its eyes have opened? That tells us the statue is paired with Daz. Daz is another Nomai. Now, no matter where he is in the star system, Daz's statue will record his memories and send them back to the Ash Twin project. And each statue is going to have a corresponding mask in the Ash Twin project, which is linked to the storage unit. This is how their memories are transported back and forth. And they have a little dialogue here, you know, about the ethics. They're like, you know, is this the same, sending someone back in time, is this the same as like rewriting time? And they kind of debate like, no, it's not. Yes, it is. It's very, very cute and interesting. But this is presumably why we are experiencing a time loop. Gabbro and us, our unnamed protag, we saw the statues open their eyes at us. We presumably got linked, and whatever the Ash Twin project is, our memories are now being translated back to that. And somehow that's what's causing this. And we can learn here too, through writing that's right next to this, these statues only activate under two conditions. Either the Ash Twin project succeeds, or in the case of massive equipment failure. So at this point in time, like before I like realized what was going on, I wrote like, you know, could this have been anyone? Like, why were we chosen? Or why are we the special ones? And the answer really is we're not special. We just happen to be there. That's kind of like a sub. Yeah, dude, exactly. That's kind of like a sub theme of this is like, there's nothing special about us. It's just right place, right time.
But maybe that's how it was always meant to be. Maybe it's like, you know, the eye of the universe, whatever is governing this world that we're exploring, like things end up working out towards the end, like not in the way that you would expect. Obviously, this game kind of subverts a lot of expectations, but like maybe that's kind of the point of it, like it doesn't matter who is there. It's just whoever is there at the right place at the right time. That is what was meant to happen. Now you could also look at it in the opposite perspective where it's just like, shit just happened. No rhyme or reason to it. And we all just got lucky. But, I'm more of like, I like to have an optimistic viewpoint, maybe with that, oh, shit was meant to be that way. So I don't know. That's all up to your own personal like perspective on it though.
If you're interested in this kind of talk, the episode we did on the Talos Principle and that game itself, obviously, which just got a re-release announced, a remaster, deals sort of a lot with that idea of determinism. And like, folks say that we don't have free will. And sometimes what they mean by that is we don't have free will because we cannot control external factors in the universe and we cannot control our wants and stuff like that. It's very fascinating. I don't know. If you like that kind of thing, check it out. That game is incredible. Just like this game. There's one more thing that I wanted to end on before we cap this episode, and we'll pick up next time. And this is a little bit out of order, but I'm doing it for dramatic effect. At a certain point, we learn that the Nomai had proposed something called the Sun Station. And when we learn about this, we don't know what it means. But they debate back and forth about how this is ethically against everything they stand for, and how can they do that to an entire solar system. And you realize that the Nomai, for some reason, had planned to blow up the sun.
Yep.
For some reason, we don't know why, they built this sun station, which we can see rotating around the sun, by the way, and they wanted to cause a supernova. And this is what I mentioned a while ago when I mentioned the characterization. When I learned this, my first thought was, okay, why did /are the Nomai wanting to blow up the sun? What can I do to stop it? What can I do to stop these villains? Is honestly like kind of I'm being a little bit dramatic, but like that was my line of thinking. Like, why are these bad guys wanting to blow up my sun? That's got to be intentional. I love it so much.
Well, and that ties back to what we were saying before, like, what price are you willing to pay for this knowledge? And that is kind of what they're asking. That's what the Nomai are arguing about back and forth, about this not being us. And they desperately want knowledge. They don't want to hurt the world, but they want knowledge. But at the same time, they're so desperate for that knowledge, they're willing to, as you can tell with the Sun Station project, like, they're considering causing a supernova in order to, for what reason we haven't found out yet, at least in the order that we're going through in these episodes. But like, you're learning more about like how much are they willing to do, how far are they willing to go for knowledge, and apparently it's just blow up a whole solar system.
Right. And as we explore too, maybe you even start thinking, how far am I willing to go to figure out what's going on here? I mean, we're in a time loop. What am I willing to risk? But yeah, it's so interesting because these Nomai are characterized as being so sweet and not meek, but just driven by curiosity. And now, I mean, it kind of makes you think about the real world too. Like, how far are we willing to go to get knowledge at all costs? Where does the notion of ethics come into scientific discovery and things of that nature? These are things that we run into all the time in real life. Maybe not in our everyday, day-to-day as normal people, but as a culture and society, like, how far are we willing to go to learn these new truths? When should ethics be a part of this conversation? That's something, I mean, not to call back to the Talos Principle again, but like, that's something we talked about there. The intersection of science and philosophy is so important because science is doing all the, like, it explains how everything works. Philosophy explains why. Philosophy brings ethics into science. They can't function without each other. It's like a yin yang, right? Yes, it's black and white, one half, but they bleed into each other, necessarily so. You can't have one without the other. And it seems at this point, what we're thinking maybe is that the Nomai didn't have part of that. They were so focused on the why, they didn't ask if it was worth it. What does Jeff Goldblum say?
Yeah, you were too busy wondering if you could do something. You never stopped to see if you should. I paraphrase that. Yes. I know it's not 1-to-1, but that's basically what it is. You were so obsessed if you could do something, you never stopped to think if you should.
What is that? Jurassic Park?
Yeah, it's Jurassic Park.
Yeah, of course. Love it. Love it. That's where I'd like to end here on a bit of dramaticism. Why are the Nomai trying to blow up the sun? We'll learn all of that and more next time. For now, we're going to take a little breather. As I mentioned before, you could check out the links in the description. You could hear all about the interview Josh did with the composer, and also see more about the podcast Still Loading, which Josh is a part of. Josh, listeners might have heard of your show before, but if this is their first time and they haven't, if you want to explain what Still Loading is and maybe like what's new over there, what have you just released, just working on, if you want to tell us a little bit about that, the floor is yours.
So, well then, over at the Still Loading podcast, if this is coming out in March, I'm in the throes of Mario month. This year I'm covering a bunch of Mario RPGs. Thankfully, all of that has already been recorded, and I just have to edit it all. Like I said, my name's Josh. I'm the host of the Still Loading podcast. I cover a variety of gaming topics. Usually, it's deep dives on video games, but I also have interviews with people in the industry, like Andrew Prallo, along with weirder ideas. Like I do that Final Fantasy draft every year, which you don't have to know. It's like what happens when Final Fantasy and fantasy sports mix, but you don't need to know anything about fantasy sports to enjoy it. Rick was on a previous episode. He was on the BioShock episode, and I need to get you back on the show at some point, so I got to correct that at some point, maybe later this year.
The difficult is that my schedule is a little bit dumb, especially now that I like get up so early. It's just, man, this is like anything in life. Scheduling is just the bane of everyone's existence. Sorry, that's been a frustration for me lately. So, like, please, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. Well, don't sell yourself short on this one. I haven't even reached out and be like, hey, what games would you want to cover? So I got to work on that from my side. But if for those who are interested, yeah, Mario Month is happening right now, covering Super Mario RPG, Paper Mario, Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, a couple others. A couple weeks ago, back in January, or I guess 2 months ago, back in January, I did an episode. This is the last episode I'll shout out. I interviewed a guy named David Cassidy, who was a strategy guide writer for Brady Games and Prima Guides back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So if you had any strategy guides for, let's say Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII or Golden Sun or Metroid Prime or Kingdom Hearts 2 or Parasite Eve, he wrote all of those. So I got to sit down and interview him, and he dropped some wild information that I was not expecting. So I always like to shout out that episode because it's something that's recent that I'm pretty proud of. So yeah, you can find the Still Loading podcast pretty much where all podcasts are at. Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at Still Loading Pod on most places. Mostly active on Blue Sky at stillloadingpod.bluesky.social and Instagram at stillloadingpod, and I stream on Twitch at stillloadingpod when at random times. So just follow me over there and you can find out when I go live.
Do you know, I noticed you didn't mention 9, you mentioned FF7 and 8. Do you know, did David Cassidy write for the infamous FF9 strategy guide?
He did not. Dan Burlow was the author of that. David brought that up unprompted, though. I was going to ask him, what do you know about the Final 9 guide? And he brought it up unprompted, so he does dive into a little bit of that as well. There's also, I can send it to you on Discord, Rick, if you're interested. Someone, after I released that episode, someone over on the My Life in Gaming Discord server contacted me and showed me a YouTube video where someone interviewed Dan Burlow about, I think it was a different guide. I don't think they were talking about Final 9 specifically, but I think they touch on it. So there's actually some information out there about it.
Well, if listeners want to access that part of the interview, they can go to Square Online and sign up for the monthly recurring subscription service.
God damn, that was so fucking stupid. He touched on how that was a demand from Square, and no one at Brady wanted it, but they were their hands were forced. So he goes into more detail in the episode, but yeah, really interesting conversation.
That's fantastic. I would very much like to listen to that. But folks, you can check that out, obviously, by going to the description. I'll have all of Josh's stuff in there, as well as all of our stuff as well. You all know the drill at this point in time. Once again, yeah, Josh, I got to thank you for stopping by. This was a lot of fun. It's a little tough because I can tell that we're both very excited about this game, but I hope that it wasn't too rambunctious and kind of disorganized. If I listen back and I can tell that I didn't do a good job of that, I'll do better for part 2. But I thought this was really productive. I thought this was a lot of fun.
There is so much to talk about this game, and I know that we're talking about trying to do this in 2 episodes with how much we had to discuss on just the intros, the mechanics, and these first 2 planets. This may end up going 3, and if you can feel free to cut this comment out if you want to, Rick, but if it does, I will happily be here for all 3 parts. I'm very much looking forward to going through the rest of this, so thank you for inviting me on for it.
It's not often a guest offers for that. We might have to talk. But once again, thank you, Josh, so much for joining me, and thank you, listeners, for sticking around to the very end. And with that, we will close out our, what would this be? Our 7th 22-minute loop? Something like that? I don't know. Math on the fly is difficult. We're closing it out for the day. We'll catch you next time on part 2. As always, my name is Rick. I'm your host. Thanks for sticking around. Can't wait for part 2. Signing off for now. Take care.